Welcome to another conversation with the Apostate Sisters. I'm Patti, and I make this podcast with my sister Nancy, and we grew up in a doomsday cult called the Worldwide Church of God. We are also nerdy about history and culture, but we're critical of religion, so get ready to get mad or to nod your head in agreement as we embark on today's topic. Now, today, we are headed into the second part of our coverage of the religious power and control wheel put out by Empathy Paradigm Therapy. It can be found in the description if you'd like to follow along with the wheel. Last time, we covered coercion, intimidation, and shame, arguably three of the best tools that religious organizations have to control people's lives. So today, we'll cover the rest of the wheel. Okay, Pats, let's get right into it. So, next on the wheel is the isolation and insulation bit. We have physical and emotional separation, which includes things like restricted access to outside supports and resources, exclusion from community, family, healthcare, school, government systems, and so on. Insider and outsider language, such as propaganda creating fear and hatred of outsiders. Other examples include claims of persecution, such as, oh, they don't understand us. Also, censorship of information, restricted access to media and outside education, and things like rewriting history and spinning current events to fit narrative. Yeah, seriously, that's such an encompassing list.
I mean, where do we even start? There are so many different spins on this we can follow.
I'm going to start actually outside of the Worldwide Church of God and just
Okay.
point out where I think this whole idea of isolating someone in order to gain control over them really hit home for me. And that was when our parents got involved, well, our dad got involved with following Brother Stair of Overcomer Ministries. I was older at that point, right? Worldwide Church of God, I was indoctrinated into from the time I was born. But when it came to Brother Stair, that was something our dad found when I think I was about 16. And so I was old enough to be paying attention to what was happening, to how he interacted with religious leaders in the world. And what I saw at that point was Brother Stair's main thing was get out of the cities, get out of the churches, get rid of your TVs, and don't go to doctors. Like those four things were the most important to him and the thing that our parents did. And so, if you think about that, things like the TV, I mean, at the time, obviously, the internet wasn't quite doing what it does these days, but the TV was a lifeline to understanding how other people think in the world and how they live in the world and who they love and what they buy and all of that. And if you can shut off your people from understanding the way the world is, the way the world works, you can convince them into your systems of thinking a little more easily. I remember our TV, big old cathode ray tube TV, sitting in the pole shed at our old house, all wrapped up in black plastic before I took it with me to college because they didn't want it in their house. And eventually they moved down to the guy's commune where the guy had total control over everyone there. So, I mean, that whole idea of isolating from the world and then putting layers around the people, the children, whoever, in order to stop the outside influences from infiltrating. So, like, blocked from within and blocked from without. And yeah, you've got them because if you don't have other inputs, like that's all you're working with is what this leader says. I mean, that is some insidious shit.
I do often wonder what was going on through your mind at the time there, Pats, because I was still in my late teen years. I heard everything going on. I heard Dad listening to Brother Stare. I had no idea how bad it had gotten to go from our father saying, "Hey, we're not going to church anymore," and having that be the happiest day of my life, to all of a sudden our family is splitting apart because they are moving away to South Carolina to join a legit commune. Talk about the ultimate example of isolation. And I do remember when our TV went away. For some reason, I was allowed to listen to shows and movies, but I wasn't able to watch it. It was some sort of weird loophole that, sometimes people use. But yeah, what a way to isolate yourself. I don't remember what all you had witnessed. I was isolating myself in a different way, just kind of putting myself aside in my bedroom and listening to music and just trying to zone out what I was hearing in the living room. Dad on his computer, listening to Brother Stair's Overcomer Ministry over and over.
From Walterboro, South Carolina, in the United States of America, we bring to you the Overcomer radio broadcast. And this is a voice that is heard around the world 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, into all the nations of the world. Hello, this is Brother Stair.
I'm ready to surrender. I gave up my job today, and I live in this house, and I got all these different things. I think I'm just going to start trying to sell them. And
Brother, I received your letter today, and I heard all about your problems and your situation. There's not much I can do except I'm going to keep on praying for you. You got yourself snared, and I really have no permanent answer for you at this point. Sir. So I'll just have to pray for you.
I stopped watching TV in 1997.
What's the next event that's going to lead to this new world order?
I believe we're going to see the revelation of the man of sin and the time period that's going to tell us we're in the last 3.5 years.
Okay, so we don't know who the man of sin is yet?
No.
So you don't have any idea who it might be?
No.
How will we know when he's revealed?
When I tell you.
And I guess I hadn't really made the connection. This guy is not part of Worldwide Church of God, but he's teaching a lot of these similar things on a level that I deemed as far worse than Herbert W. Armstrong. I just didn't know it at the time. Any commune or organization where you're secluded, you're away from society, look at the Amish.
Credit where credit is due to the Amish, though. Yes, they live this really isolated, insulated life, but I think it's called Rumspringa. They have
Fuck.
Yeah, it's a German word. They have this Rumspringa. Yeah, it's kind of like, here's your chance, kid. We want to make sure that you have a chance to go out into the world and see how it works and make your own choice if you want to stay with us or go out into the scary, scary world. I don't know how individual parents frame it, but it's really a cultural value that they do send their children at their late teens out into the world to see how it works. And they even will send them to an aunt or something that was former Amish or something like that, right? They actually do, at least in some communities, give their kids a chance to see the world. But also you have to recognize that's after 16, 17 years of only living with the Amish.
Right. I can appreciate they do that at some point, but they should have done it from the start. Children are far more impressionable in those younger years. And of course, they're going to think a certain way if that's all they've known. Right. It's hard to break that indoctrination.
But the thing is, you don't even have to go all the way to living rurally without a TV and without seeing doctors and living in a commune to recognize the hallmarks of insulation and isolation. Right. So, even if you look at, I'm going to tread into dangerous waters here, but even if you look at the choice to homeschool kids, right, to keep kids out of public school. I am not the biggest fan of public school. I think there's a lot about that maintains the caste system in our society that I could really get feisty about.
Oh, yeah.
But
my husband could tell you all about the caste system.
But yeah, if you look at how a lot of especially fundamentalist Christian folks or evangelical Christian folks decide to homeschool their kids, it's with the express intent of keeping them from getting influenced by the world. And the sad thing is these parents really do think they're doing a good thing, right? They really feel like they're protecting them and raising them to be strong men and women of God. There is a lot of love, I think, that goes into that way that people parent, but there's a lot of not understanding the actual harm going on there, right? Because as part of that, there's a lot of sexual repression, which I know is another wedge of this wheel that we'll get to. But that sexual repression is so much easier when you've got kids in a situation where they're not seeing other kids and seeing that development of kids being stupid and being weird and awkwardly making sexual advances at each other in their teen years, like these are all part of the things that we learn. In the whole realm of education, there's the homeschooling, which is a total isolation, but it doesn't even have to be that far. Right? It can just be, oh, because we're Christians, I don't want my kids going to sex ed at the public school.
Mhm.
Well, okay. What that means is your kid is only going to hear the weird shit that comes out of kids' mouths about it, right? They're not going to get the actual information in their class. And so isolating kids from information or isolating anyone from information is probably the biggest detriment that comes out of that within religious systems. I mean,
Yeah.
it's literally making people stupider. Like the
Right.
world needs people who are informed and know how to make good decisions, have strong risk management abilities or risk assessment abilities, and all of these systems of keeping people repressed and isolated directly mean that they won't have access to what they need to make good choices, to assess the risk of whatever it is they're embarking on in their life. Like these are massive concepts, and raising people ignorant is making the world objectively worse.
You know what I think it is, Pat? You're so good at this. I think you are a lot more pissed off than me.
I
And
think
I'm
I
just
am really pissed off.
and I'm going to throw it out there. I think, well, one of the reasons is, first of all, you're firstborn. Our parents wanted to make sure they trained you properly in the ways of biblical knowledge. I don't want to say the word knowledge. That's not exactly what it was, but
It was in
they want to
God's
make
ways.
sure, yes, the way that they interpreted the Bible through, Worldwide Church of God, they wanted to ensure that you were brought up to obey. They wanted to ensure that they taught you the ways that they thought were correct. I'm sure they took one look at me when I was born. They're like, fuck it, we're not even going to try. I think that I look at things from more of a humorous perspective, so to speak. I think everyone deals with their trauma in different ways. You became this amazing, like, take no bullshit activist. You are very active in your community. I mean, you interview mayoral candidates, for fuck's sake. Good for you, Pets. Your level of pissed off has turned you to be that strong voice to say, you're not going to shut me the fuck up. I got shit to say, and I'm going to speak up for not only myself, my family, my friends, but people who are marginalized, people who have far less of a voice. See, look at us now, Pat. Don't you dare.
Sorry. Well,
10
yeah,
minutes in, babe.
I know. I like to say that Herbert W. Armstrong made me an activist
Mhm.
because he talked about the world tomorrow when all the wrongs would be righted. And I was like, well, fuck yeah, I'm on board for that as a kid. And since he was playing the game of getting all the wealthy people in California to join his cult at the time, he, in the 80s, he, as we talked about in our timeline that you did an amazing job on, he started up schools in the international scene and he talked about a togetherness across the world of all of the children for a better world, and it was
Sham.
yeah, it was lip
A
service
fucking
on his
sham.
part. I know it was. It was lip service on his part, but I was a kid and I believed it. And so now I am angry. It's a righteous anger, but I will fucking use it.
You're using your anger for a good thing, Pets. I was nowhere near as angry as you were. And I think because I just don't think our parents had any hope that they were going to control me. I don't know what it was about me that they just were like, we're not even gonna
I
fucking deal with it." Uh,
You're being
I-
hard on yourself, Nancy. I don't think that's true at all. Here's what I think. I think I
okay.
was the firstborn And I think they had lots of time the first 2 years before you got there, and then another couple of years when you were just a baby in arms, where they had all of that time with really just one kid to like interface with.
Ugh.
And by the time you were 2.5, there was another kid, and another 4 years, there was another kid. So, like, I think that it was more of a we just didn't have the time. Like the focus was so intense on that firstborn. And then because they were dealing with, you know, shitty little jealous, rebellious, whatever I was at at the time. I know there was one picture where I was so jealous that you had arrived and taken the attention from me, and I was like not having it.
Are you
Anyway,
serious, Pats? You were
yeah.
jealous of me at one point in life? I find that hard to believe.
No, it's like mom looks all upset in the picture, all tight-lipped because she said that I was being a little stinker right then. And so finally I sat down to smile for the picture, and then she was just pissed off. So she's got you in her arm, me on the side, and she's like, "Yeah, here I am."
I got this titty, you got that one.
Oh, well, we weren't doing that.
You had the anger just oozing out of you, I think. You didn't have a
Oh,
place to put it except for sometimes we take our anger out on people that we feel are like a safe space. Okay. I don't blame you at all for being a huge bitch to me when we were
or
growing
they're
up.
smaller and they can't fight back. And
Right. You had
so
nowhere to put your anger, Pats. You had no place to put it. And I probably took it out on our little sister too. I don't know. I know I was very close to our brother growing up, which might be why I have so many quote unquote masculine traits today and that in the military and all this crap. But
say it's okay. Gender's a spectrum. So like
well,
whatever.
yeah. I wanted to touch a little bit on the insider outsider language. I think this is huge. I think we need to do an episode where we talk about the definitions of things because I think definitions are absolutely, on one hand, I want to say they're getting out of hand. On the other hand, I want to say it's good that we're having a conversation and clarifying what we mean when we say specific words because like there's trigger words. For example, okay, so it says here propaganda creating fear and hatred of outsiders. We could use the perfect example of us as kids, like we heard the word pagan, pagan, pagan constantly when we were kids. Did we know what the fuck it meant? Absolutely not. We just knew it was something bad. It was those people. It was an us versus them mentality. And we knew we didn't want to associate with those people. Now we've actually looked up the term and it's really just anyone who's not Christian.
Right.
When it came about, whatever century it was, the people living in the fields, maybe they were worshiping other gods at the time, the Greek and Roman gods. I think that was the time period where they started using the term pagan. It was really just farm people. It was people who were just living their fucking lives. They had their own beliefs. And then Christianity came onto the scene and we're like, well, we're going to associate this term with you because us Christians don't want to be associated with you in any way. And therefore we're going to put negative connotations with it. And in every time that we put the word pagan in there, it means something negative. I just finished watching the show Vikings. Amazing show, by the way. It was created by the same dude that did the Tudors, like Henry VIII, his story. But yeah, the term pagan kept coming up with the Anglos, the Saxons, and the Vikings. And so it was really interesting to me to kind of revisit, like, yeah, the word pagan. The word pagan was a word that I heard all the time as a kid, not really knowing what it meant. I just knew how it made me feel. It made me feel afraid of those people and people I didn't want to associate with. What our parents taught was the rest of the world. It was us and the rest of the world.
So everything you're saying there, Nancy, is exactly the reason that I always talk about definitions when it comes to the words we use, because I am convinced that people, unless it's for a scientific paper type thing, people do not use words for their definitions. People
Right.
use
Yes.
words for the feelings it creates either in their body or the feeling they want to create in other people. Right? We like to think, yeah, we have a dictionary, and so words just mean what words mean. And no, I'm sorry, that is not true.
Mhm.
Words mean to each individual what they have been conditioned to or learned to associate with those words. Just like you're
Right.
saying, the idea of pagan, it just, ooh, that was like something to back away from, something to not be, right? It was as bad as it could be to be pagan.
I want a t-shirt that says pagan, by the way. I like the term heathen too. It's beautiful.
I
Yeah.
like the word apostate.
I had someone, okay, it was our brother. I- Last time I saw our brother, I try to avoid the topic of politics and religion because I just don't want to go there with him. All right. He pulls out all the usual stops. And instead of having a conversation, it's usually I'm gonna throw shit at the wall and see what sticks.
Ah,
Yeah.
the old Gish Gallop.
Yes. Yes. But he asked me this question, do you think murder is wrong? Okay. Now what I asked, first of all, this very generic question, first let's define what wrong means. Okay.
Yeah.
Then let's define what murder means, because that can be quite the spectrum, right? What do we determine what is wrong? Is it a sin against a deity? Is it something that me as a secular humanist is just like, I view that as wrong because that harms someone else? And then you have to look at the term murder. I don't think this is black and white. There is no yes or no here. There is a conversation that ended abruptly because of who I was talking to. But I wanted to have the conversation and be like, murder? Okay, well, in what context? I asked what context. I said, is it someone who is defending themselves and their family against someone who's trying to cause them harm? Is it someone who blatantly just kills someone because they want to take what that other person has? There's a lot of different ways that we can define both of those terms. We have to come, and if we can't agree on what the definitions are, then we may as well not continue the conversation. We have to get first clarify what we're both talking about. Otherwise, we are going to be talking over each other and having an argument instead of having a productive conversation, which is what we should be doing. Don't you just push your narrative on me and then expect me to be like, oh, you got me there. Okay. Yeah. No, not going to happen. Okay.
Right. Your buzzwords don't work on me.
We mainly talk about things from the religious perspective here. We don't really touch on politics very much. I know you're an activist, Patti. You have a sign that says Black Lives Matter behind you. And I realize this is somehow triggering a lot of people too. And I think it's because of, again, it's going back to those negative connotations that people view it as a terrorist organization or whatnot, because they're looking at people who, I don't know, throw fireballs into businesses and such and thinking, oh, they represent the whole organization, the whole concept. Maybe you want to talk about that a little bit, but again, it doesn't have to be just one word. In this case, that is a movement showing that, hey, we care about these people's lives. It doesn't mean that other people's lives don't matter. It means that we need to zero in on these people who have been marginalized and their voices have not been heard for so fucking long that we need to draw attention to it. So do you want to talk about that a little bit and that propaganda?
I kind of feel like you just wrapped that up with a sweet little bow there, Nancy. You're absolutely right. I think that all of the things we're talking about, the othering that goes on in a high control situation. Last episode we talked about how we can see these measures of control happening in the real world, not just in religious things, as you mentioned. And this is a perfect example of that because all of the
Right.
people who maybe feel a little bit down and out, maybe like their life didn't go the way they wanted, and they can't possibly think that it was something they did wrong. There's that word again. All these people have grown up in an America that promised them the American dream, that everything would be beautiful and wonderful and they'd have, milk and honey flowing and all of the riches of the world would be theirs. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Like that is what is promised not only in churches, but that's kind of what's promised with the American dream. And then inflation and the reality of our monetary system, our caste system comes into play, and people grow up and they're like, this isn't what I thought I was promised, right? It's their own little version of the world tomorrow on American exceptionalism. And so when they realize, like, oh, this isn't how I thought it should be, and we have this like pull yourself up by the bootstraps mentality in our country. So then they're taking like, oh, this isn't how it was supposed to be. It must be that there's something wrong with me, that it's my fault. But that is such a painful concept, and people have a hard time taking that on board, which, they probably shouldn't, because we should see the systems for what they are and what they've done to us. But I think those folks in a situation like that are totally primed to hear, well, hey, you would have had the perfect life, except there's these people over here who are taking your jobs. There's these people over here who think that they deserve more than you. Mm-hmm. And while those things aren't true, taking someone who's primed for that and feeding them little bits of information that help them think that these people are against them and taking away what they should have had is very powerful toward turning people against each other. And when we are turned against each other, we don't stand up for our rights. When we're turned against each other, we don't join together to fight the powers that are making our lives terrible. We don't see it because we're too busy being pointed at each other. This fight in this country for a better world is not left versus right. The people who have political power in this country would very much like us to continue thinking that this fight is red versus blue, black versus white, but it isn't, or left versus right. None of those things are true. This is all of us fucking in this together, because I will say it over and over. We are 8 billion of us organisms living here on this planet together, which is a rock flying through
space.
Yeah. And
sorry, you've said it before?
I know, I do. It's my thing.
Horst Valkai would be proud.
So here we are, and it's only us on this rock. Like, we have to work together to make it work for us, right? And so if we can't have that viewpoint on it, it's all too easy for us to be pointed at each other, and helping us focus on what we don't have and what wrongs were done to us or supposedly done to us is so important if you want to control people.
I did want to mention something that I thought was pretty horrifying that our father had said. Last time my husband and I were in South Carolina, we had attended the Feast of Tabernacles with him, sitting through one service because I wanted to make my husband see a glimpse of what we went through as kids. But anyway, I wanted to try to bond with my father a little bit. At the time, our mother was going to a different church, David C. Pack's church, but she's with the Church of the Great God now. But anyway, so it was just Dad. All right. And you know what Dad likes to do? He likes to listen to his political and religious propaganda through radio, through Fox News, the usual suspects. He loves Dan Bongino. I thought, fuck it. I'm going to talk to Dad a little bit about some of the stuff that he's listening to, because I know he did this on purpose. He wanted me to hear some of the stuff he was listening to. And it came up with the concept of immigrants. There were a bunch of people from Mexico that were trying to get over the border into the US. And Dad, of course, was just not having it. Send them back to their country. He said,
for fuck's sake, he really said that?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah. He
okay.
Said,
why don't you just listen to Fox News and just regurgitate without thinking?
Yes.
For fuck's sake.
Yes. Well, I tried to keep the conversation going. I said, Dad, they're trying to get into this country because they are that desperate that they want a better life, because their own government is not protecting them. Their families are in danger. The cartel is taking over farms and taking over people's businesses, kidnapping people for ransom. It's happening all the time down there. And I told Dad, I'm like, why don't you put yourself in these people's shoes? If they are so desperate enough to make that very dangerous trek to come to the US to try to get a better life, even if it's scrubbing fucking toilets in the US for minimum wage, they still think that's a better option than what they are living down there. And I said, Dad, you're very fortunate that you were not one of those people. And I said, if you were one of those people, you might do the same to protect your family. And I said, I have no problem with them being here. They're earning their keep. They are doing jobs that a lot of Americans don't even want, and they're willing to do it because their lives are such shit down there that they're willing to sacrifice it all, possibly getting killed in the process. And then I brought up the example of like, well, my husband's an immigrant. He was not born in this country, and yet he is a citizen of it now. And Dad did bring up the example. He said, well, your husband contributes to this economy. He said,
Oh.
educated, he has a good paying job and all that. And I looked at Dad, I said, so first of all, my husband is here because he comes from a high caste in India and his family comes from money. If he was one of these tribal people that I have met, they had no opportunities. And so you're saying, so they were victims of their circumstances and they can't create a better life for themselves simply because they didn't get handed that ticket from an early age. You know, it's not like here where if you grew up poor, you could become wealthy at some point. My husband is here because he came from money and he came from status. And is that how it's going to be, where we just have people in this country who are at that I guess higher tier that people look at as a good thing, like, oh yeah, and they make good money, they add to the economy. Great. We need people at all different levels to do all kinds of different jobs here. I didn't like where he went with that. Yes.
Well, where he went with that, it sounds a lot like he went to a place of some people are better than others.
The only reason that a lot of other people in India are not here is because they are not on that same level. You don't fall under that caste.
I think we've covered so much about creating fear because it ranges right away from learning about hell and the fact that a God cares what you do and don't do.
Right.
I mean, it's just baked in to the absolute most basic thing there is about Christianity in general. And I know there's a push toward, acceptance of Christianity or a religion as not high control, but I just can't see it. I just don't see how you can glom on to anything approaching, especially an organized religion, and think that you're not headed straight into a high control situation. As soon as there's a hell, as soon as there's judgment for anything, as soon as sin exists, you're there. It's high control.
This next one, claims of persecution. Ooh. I mean, there are so many different ways we can take this. Claims of persecution. Okay, there's a couple things I wanted to talk about with this section here. First off, why don't we talk Christmas? War on Christmas. Ding, 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 ding.
Oh my God. You're not wrong. It's the dumbest media thing ever.
Patti, persecution. Let's talk war on Christmas. Okay.
Let's do it.
It's like war on Christmas commence. Every single year we see the same thing over and over, like just regurgitating this shit. Now, I can't speak for everyone, but I think what the whole war on Christmas bit is a lot of Christians out there, I'm not speaking for everyone here, but obviously you and I were not raised with Christmas, and I personally don't really give a shit because I don't do anything during Christmas. I don't really celebrate anything anyway. I just usually take a trip somewhere. But when Christmas time comes around, for some reason, there are quite a few religious groups out there that think they are being persecuted when we say phrases like happy holidays. Now, I know we talked about this in another episode.
It's so dumb. Okay, I'm sorry.
I know, but we got to talk about it because it comes up every single year. And this is just one example of this propaganda I wanted to address. Some people think that they are victimized and persecuted because of the inclusivity of happy holidays. If I go up to a Jewish person, knowing that they're celebrating Hanukkah, and I say Merry Christmas, doesn't that kind of make me a little bit of a bitch? Why would I say Merry Christmas to someone that I know is clearly not celebrating it? The happy holidays concept is addressing what I believe is the entire holiday season. So I don't know how far back people go with it, but there is Halloween that starts in fall. There is Thanksgiving, which is really the only one that our family celebrated because it wasn't quote unquote pagan. And then you also have Hanukkah for people that celebrate the Jewish holidays. You have Christmas Eve, Christmas Day. You have New Year's Eve. You have New Year's Day. You have the winter solstice. You also have Kwanzaa. There are a number of different holidays that fall into this holiday season. And what people are trying to get across is that we are being more inclusive by saying happy holidays. If someone tells me Merry Christmas, like around Christmas time, I'll likely say it back. I don't care. That's fine. I might say happy holidays too, because I don't know what that person celebrates. And I just want to let them know, hey, I care about what they believe and what they think. I am not just going to assume that they are celebrating Christmas. And a lot of non-Christians celebrate Christmas too. And more fucking power too. You can celebrate whatever you want for whatever reason. Go for it. But I hate this whole victim mentality when people say, you are taking away our holiday. You are taking Jesus out of Christmas and replacing him with, I don't know, Santa and all the other holidays out there that you've created. It's fucking ridiculous. We hear it every single year. And I don't know how many times we can explain things. It's kind of like having to explain the definition of an atheist to people who look at us as if we're evil people and worship Satan. How many fucking times we have to say what it means? And they still don't understand because they want to stay on that track of like the victimization.
And that's a perfect example of how people respond to the feelings created in their body from a word instead of the definition of it. I think my favorite thing to laugh at about the war on Christmas is the Starbucks cups every year.
I was gonna bring that up.
Right, because somebody in evangelical land decides, oh no, we can't have that color or that image. Like, where's the traditional Christian images on your cups? I don't know. And I remember one year Starbucks was kind of like giving the finger to all of it and like, we're just gonna make plain red cups. What are you gonna do with that? And literally, I still heard people in the news being like, hey, they can't do that with the full, oh, it's just red. What do we say?
I mean, that's a huge fuck you. Like, we're sick of your shit. We're a business where we sell coffee, for fuck's sakes. Oh my
I know.
God. And they're so concerned about the imagery on their cups. People need some fucking things to do.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. People need maybe a little bit more to do. Maybe they need to recognize that it shouldn't be the goal of their life to have that great vacation and that nice pair of boots. Like maybe they could look a little farther afield from their own selfish needs and desires. Just saying.
Inclusivity does not equal oppression. It just means that you can't have it all to yourself. Certain things have to be shared here.
Begs the question of why do you think you deserve that and your neighbor doesn't?
Next one we have on the wheel is loss of autonomy. There's a lot we could cover on this, but Pats, why don't you go ahead and give us all a definition of what autonomy actually is?
Going straight to the old Wikipedia.
Awesome.
All right, here we go. In developmental psychology and moral, political, and bioethical philosophy, autonomy is the capacity to make an informed, uncoerced decision. So that's the heart of it. So personal autonomy is the capacity to decide for oneself and pursue a course of action in one's life, often regardless of any particular moral content.
I would agree with that definition. Yeah.
Yeah. So getting to decide things for yourself.
Yeah. In simple terms, it's just our bodies are our own, our minds are our own. We don't want to be coerced in any way. We don't want to be forced to do anything against our will. That is bodily autonomy. So we can cover that a little bit here.
I've heard it said that like my right to swing my fist ends at the tip of your nose.
Ooh.
Right? So like in theory, if we all have full autonomy, bodily and otherwise, we can use our autonomy to do kind of whatever we want, except that has a limit. And that limit is when our choice to do something starts to affect others in a way that they don't want.
I've also seen the example, I don't want to touch on abortion too much because, again, that's also another topic that we can cover in an entire episode. But I've heard it said, your religion ends where my body begins. All right. If your religion is having some sort of negative impact on my decisions with my own body, my own mind, that's where we have a problem with violation of bodily autonomy.
Let's go into that because that covers circumcision too. So right there, this is specifically bodily autonomy, and I think we want to cover it in terms of like making decisions, so like mental autonomy too. But right, as soon as you decide you can remove body parts from people who are too small to make those choices for themselves, and as soon as you can tell anyone that their genitalia is not for them and has to be used in this very specific way, even if other ways are still safe and healthy, yeah, you've got control. If you can tell somebody they can't orgasm without it being in the way you say, I'm pretty sure that's a pretty big part of the human experience that just got taken away from you.
All right, let's go through the bullet points here. So under loss of autonomy, and thanks for clarifying, Pat, because I think it is very important to understand what autonomy is as opposed to bodily autonomy. I think it's just that we can get a better grasp of what bodily autonomy is, like it's clear as to what that is. So first one is constant contact. So you have frequent group meetings, you have check-ins, little or no free time. It's kind of like the long sermons that we talked about with taking up our time. If you're constantly in that situation where you're getting told this information, it's easier to control your autonomy. Tightly monitored group communication. Yeah, if this could be used in an abusive situation where you have a partner that's constantly looking through your phone at your text messages or who you're emailing and such. Tightly monitored communication where you have someone telling you what you can and can't say to others and who you talk to, maybe. Denial of privacy. Oh, that's quite a big one. No alone time, no secrets, or having any private experiences like masturbation.
Just like that. Well, I
Just
mean, the next
Mhm.
line is forced confession and peer policing. So we're right
Oh my
back
God,
to
Catholics.
Right, we're right back to the Catholic habits around confessing to the priest, and that is the exact same energy that carries through to evangelical accountability groups. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it's a measure of control. Like I know they want to couch it in the idea of support for each other and helping each other on their walk with God and all of that. But I'm sorry, when you take three
Cringe.
steps back, you realize no, it's actually perpetuating shame. I think we talked about that last episode with the,
We did. Yeah.
men coming to these meetings so that they can admit to how much they're struggling with being a sexual being in the world. That's autonomy, making that decision to do that for yourself and having the time and space to be alone for a long enough
Yeah.
for that. Kind of a big deal. Brings up a good question then, right? Especially when it comes to the power dynamic between parents and children of where is that line of
Mm-hmm.
appropriate behavior when you're a parent and you're trying to keep your kids safe from potentially being involved or connected to people who are less than good for them or
Right.
getting a hold of, like the peer pressure and drugs and all of that, right? Like there are things that I think a parent could no, next thing is justification, but that a parent could justify to say, I really am doing this in the best interest of my child, right? And so I think there is potentially some appropriate ways for that to happen, and especially in a juvenile parent situation, I think that that has some differences to be talked about. But when we're talking about fully grown adults, right? Whether it's in a partnership or in an organization, if those fully grown adults are being treated and watched like you would watch a child, I think that's the point that we can recognize. Okay, this is like an unhealthy way of power being used over another person.
So next one we have denial of self-trust, not trusting in your own instincts or fearing it actually. And then fearing your needs and desires. It goes back to the whole passage in the Bible, lean not to your own understanding, which is very harmful, telling you, oh, you think this way. You shouldn't. That's bad. That's evil. That's a sin. I get the instinct that that person is not a good person over there, and I feel like I'm in danger, and us not trusting that instinct
But they're a man of
puts
God.
us in danger.
How dare I think that about them? Because they're
Mm.
God's chosen whatever.
No, nope.
And they're doing things to me in the back room that I apparently can't tell because that's God's person.
Oh my God,
Sorry,
gross.
it goes there. It does.
How many examples of that have we seen? The incest accusations about Herbert W. Armstrong, the proven sexual assault from Brother Stair, another person that our father followed. How many times does this have to go on before we wake up and be like, we need to put a stop to this shit? These people are having power and control over people's lives, and we're just allowing it to happen because we think they're some sort of prophet of God. It's fucking disgusting.
Ridiculous. It's stupid.
Next one, needing permission and approval for decision making. Okay, that one we can talk about a little bit more. No beliefs or opinions that don't match the group ideology. Yeah, that one we'll touch on probably a little bit more, but yeah, denial of self-trust. What do you think about that, Pat? There's a lot of example. We did just go through, the whole fearing, not trusting our own ability, which we should be taught to trust our own ability. I don't think it usually steers us wrong. I think sometimes when I get a sense about people, I'm just like, I don't think that person has good intentions. I think I shouldn't necessarily judge the person, but I should be cautious to say, like, I think there's a reason that I think this way about somebody and look into it a little bit further.
Let's talk about denial of self-trust, though. I mean, to me, this is one where within churches, there's, kind of like we have the evangelical voting bloc because that group has been convinced that they can't just go ahead and engage with the candidates in an election and decide who
Mm.
would be the best for that role. Instead, it comes down to, well, the church has a very clear focus on a party or a candidate. And so you're kind of disabused of being able to make those choices for yourself in what is ostensibly a situation where that's actually what we want as a country, is we
Mhm.
want everyone to be fully engaged and aware and making their decisions based on the best knowledge they could find. But instead, the whole thing became a propaganda game where the all of the people have lost their autonomy of making that decision because it's a two-party system. And we've been conditioned into, well, it's us or them on either side of that two-party system. So to me, that is a loss of autonomy because our decision making has been thwarted and pressed down to just bad choices.
Or making choices based on the majority and fearing what other people think of us if we say, well, we don't agree with this and I want to stand up for it, but I'm going to keep my mouth shut because I fear the repercussions of it. And therefore, all
Right.
these wonderful ideas get shut down.
And I mean, that gets into coercion a little bit because all of a sudden losing your autonomy can be made to feel safe
Mm-hmm.
because someone else is going to take care of that for you.
Mm-hmm.
And that is maybe the insidious part of that is that you can think, oh, I have finally found the right thing. And what that actually meant was, okay, you don't get to think for yourself anymore.
And then getting into the next one, needing permission and approval for decision making. I mean, yeah, we see that in religion all the time. Let's talk about the next one. No beliefs or opinions that don't match group ideology. So it's basically, this is the way you're supposed to think. And if you think outside of it, well, you're one of those people. You're outside of our group, and therefore you don't belong. And then that's where isolation comes back into play.
I had a situation when I was part of an evangelical church where I was just kind of standing around in the foyer before church started. And there was this older couple, or kind of like middle-aged couple, I guess. And I had seen them at church for years, and I was clearly invested in the idea that everyone thought the same at church until the husband in this couple, for whatever reason, the topic of abortion came up. And he just flat out said how he was pro-abortion or pro-choice and how it just made sense because of who we bring into the world and what our intentions are by doing that. I don't remember exactly everything he said to make me realize he was totally affirming the idea of abortion and championing it. But in that moment, it was kind of like a light bulb went on, or I was wearing my shocked face because I could not believe that here there's this older man, in theory conservative because he's at the same
Mhm.
church that I'm at, and he's talking pro-choice shit. That blew my fucking mind. And I, right, like it's little, but it wasn't. It was big. It was just that moment
Mhm.
of me being like, oh, so not everyone thinks the same here. So
Right.
then it was like, oh, other thoughts that I have, but I shove down, maybe I don't have to shove them down.
Yeah.
So it was a big deal to think outside of groupthink for me. And I was
Mm.
22 or 23 by the time I did that.
It's like the definitions of, well, what's a Republican? What is a Democrat? You're going to get different answers depending on who you talk to. Republicans are going to say that Republicans and Democrats are very different and vice versa. So it really depends on your narrative. I could probably use the example of being in the military. A lot of the soldiers there are Christians or have some sort of God faith. It's very rare to come across an atheist. Not that atheists necessarily talk about it. So there could have been more than I knew. The US Army is very much embedded Christian ideology. If you don't think that way, you are kind of going to be an outsider. You're going to be looked down upon.
Don't you think it serves the military well to have their soldiers be religious? I mean, because we're identifying here how religion is automatically a situation of control. And I'm pretty sure
Mhm.
if there was ever a time to have control over people, it was the ones that you were handing guns to.
Okay, next one on the list is justification. So we have minimizing or invalidating harm caused to someone else. Maybe they downplay, gaslight, or claim that whatever they said or whatever they did was some sort of a misunderstanding, making you question how you interpreted things. Or they might say something like, oh, it wasn't that bad, or that never actually happened. You're taking it out of context, you're being too sensitive, and all that.
Oh, that one. You're being too sensitive. That
Being
one is,
too sensitive. Yes. Hmm.
I'm gonna guess that one uses some other wedge of the wheel also.
We also have victim blaming, such as denying that it was abuse or calling it some sort of discipline or correction, which we covered discipline already. You say things like, oh, this wouldn't have happened if you would have blah, blah, blah. That was your fault. You
Oh,
made me do this. I hit my wife because she said this to me or she did this.
there is so much rape culture going on in this one.
Or when people say things like, oh, this is for your own good. Ugh.
You mean
Disgusting.
like what we were told before we were spanked with a wooden spoon?
Pretty much like that, except they didn't actually say anything. There was just, we got the silent treatment a lot, or at least I remember we did.
Oh, I was
Silent
told I'm
treatment.
doing this because I love you.
Really? They said that?
Yep, directly.
I'm physically abusing you because I love you? I don't remember
I mean,
that
they
shit.
they didn't say physically abuse, but they said, "Yeah, I'm spanking you. I'm doing this because I love you."
Wow.
When I
That is
say that the church convinced parents to do things that were abusive and hateful and to believe that it was love, that's one of them.
so you remember that, and I remember the getting the soap in the mouth. Interesting.
And we didn't even talk about those with autonomy, but yeah.
I feel like I kind of remember that now that you say that I'm doing this because I love you. Maybe I remember one time hearing that from mom and dad. I'm doing this because I love you, yet I'm screaming at the top of my lungs. I'm scared. My autonomy is being taken away. Um, I have
Right.
nowhere to turn to, no one else listening to me. And the really sad part about that, Pats, is we didn't even know what it was that we did wrong or how to correct it. No room for conversation.
Well, we knew what behavior we did that they wanted to be different. I don't
I,
think we understood the broader context of who we were becoming or how our actions affected other people. It was more about you did wrong. And that's what punishing you for.
So I remember getting spanked because you remember I used to have either like little sticks or straws, things that I would twiddle in my hand because I had that much anxiety that I didn't know where to put it. And I got spanked for that because, I remember our parents saying, you're not going to do that. And Dad caught me with one of those twiddle sticks once, and I just remember sobbing when he found it because I knew what was coming. I don't know why I did it. I just knew that I couldn't stop doing it because my body needed to do it.
You should know something, Nancy. That
Hmm.
behavior, the twiddling the stick thing, like
Mm-hmm.
maybe that's an anxiety thing, but more likely it's a stimming behavior, which is a really important thing that neurodivergent people do for themselves.
But as a child, how the fuck was I supposed to know that?
Maybe the parents should have. Well, okay, I'll back up. See, here's the thing. When we were children, the understandings around the autism spectrum and neurodivergency was not as developed as it is now. And so, unfortunately, because they came to the parenting table with us with a punitive mindset, there was, granted that those research wasn't there, but they had nothing to draw on to understand what was going on when you had this twiddle stick thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess I can give them that like that wasn't understood in the broader world, but they didn't take a moment to think maybe there's someone who can help with this, or maybe there's a reason, or maybe anything. Like all they cared about was not looking, I assume, looking weird or looking like we had something wrong with us um,
Right.
by you doing that. Like they wanted to make themselves feel comfortable again by correcting your behavior. And it
Mm-hmm.
didn't seem terribly connected to concern about your well-being. And to me, that would be the thing that I would take issue with forever and always, more than what they did or what was driving them.
Okay, and then the next one we have is invoking the greater good. So this is things like excusing or covering up abuse to protect like a group's agenda or forcing victims to forgive and reconcile to restore unity. This is everywhere. Protecting a group's agenda. Now, no matter where you're at, no matter what group you're in, there's going to be those, what people call like bad seeds, those people that make mistakes and they do things that make the group look bad and they don't necessarily represent the group.
Ooh,
A lot of Christian organizations really push this whole like, well, forgive and forget. It's like, no, we're not forgiving or forgetting. You don't tell me I need to forgive something when I have been hurt so badly, especially when we don't think that the person is being genuine in their apology.
when you're being told to forgive and it's supposed to be better for you or something, but you have to recognize, no, it's not. Me forgiving makes it better for the people I'm making uncomfortable by the fact of what happened to me being known. And
Yep.
so it makes it better for them if I just sweep things under the rug and can stop them from being uncomfortable and from making their organization look bad. Because at
Right.
that point, it's the organization of high control, if you will, that is stepping in and needing to save face. And that happens even with pushing down and ignoring and hiding the people who've been directly hurt. And so we ignore the real people in the situation in order to protect this organization that we've decided has big enough value to do that, when in
Right.
fact it probably doesn't.
Right.
Well, Nancy, we seem to be incapable of getting through this wheel in a timely fashion. It's almost like we get really passionate and we have to talk about it all. So good job, us. But what this means is we're going to have to come back for a third episode to really get into the shit with this wheel. Because we still
Yeah.
have, I think we might touch again on justification, but next time when we come back, we're going to be going into sex and gender control and economic control. And if you've heard us
Woo!
talk about the Worldwide Church of God and the system of 3 tithes that they had, you will know that that will be a juicy one for us. So I hope you come back for the next episode. Thanks, everybody.